Hello students, we were discussing about the types of novels, and in our early lectures we have gone through some of the historical novels, and these historical novels are definitely the part and very big interesting contribution to the literary world. As we have seen, the literature is a manifestation of human being, and uh, the romanticism, the interesting facets, interesting plots, incidents that has taken place over the period of time are always an enchanting part to the writers. And at the same time, when we discuss about the things that are there, so when we go through the historical incidents, there are very interesting issues and concerns or the plot. The author is very susceptible to look for the plot, and that is what we have seen in the literature. There are some of the interesting facts and interesting stories or events that has taken place, so naturally the writers are going to attract to such a incidents, and that is what it has generated the romantic or historical imagination of the writers called Walter Scott. Walter Scott is very much famous for his historical novels, and that we are going to discuss in the present term. As we have seen, there are certain features. These are not aimed and by all features of the historical novel, but there are within this. There are so many such say features that we will feel that are reflected in the historical novels. But to mention the few, we have these points that we are going to discuss here. And as we have seen, this particular term is going to reflect us how history is recreated. The author who needs to go back into the particular period of time in the history. Suppose the author is writing in the novel about the king who lived in the particular age. So the age needs to be recreated. The incidents and events and consequences needs to be recreated the in the imagination. The writer must bring out down to earth the realities and the pictures or the portrayal of each and every setting, character, their attires, clothes, incidents, everything that must relate to the particular time. And that is what it is, a imaginative recreation of the history. The incidents and the events that are taking place needs to be recreated. The story needs to be recreated. The incidents and the sequence needs to be recreated in the novel form. That is what we must look at. This is a very important task. The poetic truth of the author should be modeled in such a deep conscious way that the history needs to be recreated, but not by just the author while writing, but also it should bring out the picture of that particular era in the reader's mind too. So it is very much important for the author to recreate the history in the form of novel. It is the capacity, it is the poetic, creative, cognitive development of the author on which the so-called success of the historical novel depends on. So we must think about that historical personages needs to be recreated. So, there are so many novels in English literature which are bearing some record of the history, may be called as historical novels. These are, of course, down to earth realistic, so the history that has taken place in reality. So these novels may have realistic features too. So, including there are so many books or novels that are there, but we have very famous book in the historical novel genre, and these are George Eliot's Middlemarch, Tolstoy's War and Peace. These novels makes the use of events and personages from the historical past to add interest and credibility to the narrative. But in them, the principal focus is on the fictional protagonist. What we usually specify as the historical novel, it began in 19th century with Walter Scott. The historical novel not only takes its settings or some characters or the events from history, but entirely makes the historical events and issues crucial to the central characters and for the most part of the narrative, of course the narrative also. So some of the greatest historical novels are also being used to give us the detailed account of the history. It may be history documented, it may be historical record. So, the use of the protagonist and his actions reveal that the author has a deep process to make this as an entirely historical process. And these historical novels brings us everything from the particular history, even the setting, the details about the palaces, the details about the time and events of that particular time is given in a very detailed way. There are some historical references to the ramparts, to the forts, and to the soldiers, and to the personages, and to the knights, and soldiers, and yeomen, and whatever there. So everything is referred way back in the history, and all that makes the historical novels as purely historical. So the entire process is deeply envisaged by the author. So one or the author needs the historical, imaginative, poetic truth or poetic say creation in the sense. The examples that we see are Walter Scott's Ivanhoe. Ivanhoe is a very famous novel set in the period of Norman domination of the Saxons at the time of Richard I. As we have seen, we have another example, Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, which is set in Paris and London during the French Revolution. So, Charles Dickens brings out the story, A Tale of Two Cities. George Eliot's Romola, that was set in Florence during the Renaissance period. Margaret Mitchell, she has written Gone with the Wind, and it was during the Georgia in the Civil War and Reconstruction. An influential treatment of the form was used by the Marxist scholar and critic like George Lucas, the historical novel. So, there are other novels that we see. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man is also one of the record that we find of the of the development with regard to the black woman. Walter Scott's Waverley novels are very famous the character or the front page of the book brings us the story that it's a historical novel. See, Kenilworth by Sir Walter Scott is also one of the examples that we find in the historical novel. As we have discussed, Charles Dickens brings us the detailed record of the Victorian England. We have hard times, great expectations, Nicholas Nickleby, A Tale of Two Cities, as the record of the historical novels. You will find the picture that is, of course, reflects the history, the 19th century England, London especially. At the same time, we have Leo Tolstoy, as we mentioned. War and Peace is one of the example that we find in case of this. So, when we discuss about historical novel, we must ensure that history is revisited. In the Jawahar, we have Raja Yashwant, who has written a novel called Jaiba. Jaiba is a novel set in the 13th century Java Sultan, and how Mughal dynasty or Jaiba, who fought against all the odds in his way and established the Java Sultan or the chair of Java. So, how he fought, how he installed his reign and expanded his reign, how his lineage, how he got married, how his lineage he handed over. So, all these incidents and stories are envisioned by the author called Raja Yashwant, brings us in the historical novel, in the true, say, novel of the soil, and that is Jaiba. So it is produced by Raja Yashwant of our Java Sansthan. So we should be proud of such a novel. See, so this is an example of a historical novel. So in the sense, with the examples and with suitable examples, we must prove that what you have understood as the term does stands for. So we must ensure that we have got the historical novel in the true sense of the term. So with this, I hope you will understand. For more references, you can go through the M.H. Abrams book. You can also go through some of the a book, History of English Literature by Mundra, that is by Prashant Book Depot Bareilly. A copy is available in our college library, so you can go and read that. So with this, thank you very much.